Hello and welcome back. In this chapter, we're going over all of the tools and techniques we're going to be using to cut out hair. Now, it's important to know that these don't exist in a bubble. You can use different tools and techniques to cut out hair in different situations, and pretty much every photo where you're trying to cut a person out of the background and trying to cut their hair out, you're going to run into different situations with every single photo. So our goal here is to provide you with all of the different tools and techniques you could possibly use, so once you feel comfortable with those, you could then use each individual tool as needed to get the job done. Here in our first section, we're going to be selecting hair from the background. Now, this is a perfect tool whenever you have a slightly different color of hair than the background. Let's say your hair is relatively light and your background is relatively dark. That's going to work well, or vice versa. If you have dark hair on a light background, that's going to work. Or even, let's say maybe you have red hair on a green background, this is also going to work. So we're going to be selecting the color range of the hair and using that to mask out hair. Now, if you haven't already done so, be sure to download your sample images so you can follow along. And you can do those right on the tutorial page. Let's go ahead and get started here. We're in our sample images, chapter 2, and we're in section 1, selecting hair. So let's take our selecting hair image. I'm going to click and drag this right into Photoshop. There we go. And let's hit F for full screen. So the first thing that I'm going to notice when I'm looking at this image is that our hair is backlit, which is actually really great because it gives us a lot of separation between our subject and the background. So you can see our subject has a relatively light kind of like a glow all the way around her. It's a little bit fuzzy right around down here, but for the most part, we're going to be able to use this color range to select her hair and then remove the background. The first thing we're going to do is click on our background layer, and we're going to go to select and down to color range. Now with our color range, you're going to have a little eyedropper here. You want to make sure to just click right kind of at the edge of your image. And you have a few different options for your preview. You can look at this in grayscale, you can see black matte, what it would look like on a white matte, or even a quick mask. I usually just keep this in grayscale. And the area that's light is the area that gets selected. The area that's dark does not get selected. So here with your eyedropper tool, you basically want to click on the area that you want selected. And in this case, I don't necessarily need to click on the hair on the inside of our subject's head. Mostly I'm going to stay right here towards the outside. And the reason is, as long as I have my edge really well selected out, it's very easy for me to fill in the interior part of my subject with white on a layer mask, making that visible. Okay? So really, when we're cutting hair out, it's all about the edge. The interior part is very easy to mask out. Here with our edge, let's use our eyedropper and just select hair, right at that edge, and that's looking pretty good there. You also have the option to increase your fuzziness, which will simply select more or less based on how large or how small your number is here. Now, my suggestion is to create something that will make sure you include all of the hair, okay? And even if it includes a little bit of the background, that's totally okay most of the time. Now, for this starting image here, let's just choose 110 as our fuzziness. Now, we can see we've got our subject selected out. All the individual hairs are selected, which looks good. They're all light colored. We have mostly dark background, but we do have some light patches. That's a relatively easy fix though. Again, it's all about the edge, okay? Mostly I'm just looking right here at the edge of my subject's hair. And if that's fairly well defined, everything else is really, really simple. So let's go ahead and hit OK, and that's basically going to turn this, the lighter areas into a selection. So now that those lighter areas are in a selection, we're going to load a layer mask. And anytime you have a selection active, all you have to do is click on your layer mask button, and it's going to automatically load that selection into the layer mask. Our selection is active. You can see these little marching ants is what they're called, little dots all over our screen. Let's click here on our layer mask icon. There we are. And we can see now we have a layer mask for our layer. So we're going to be using layer masks throughout this tutorial to define visibility. Basically, that's what a layer mask does. A light area on a layer mask becomes visible, and a dark area becomes invisible. So much better than anything like the eraser tool You can undo this at any time. For instance, if I click on my layer mask, so we have our layer and our layer mask. If I click on my layer mask and I paint white, there we go. You can see everywhere I paint white becomes visible. Let's just undo that. Everywhere I paint black becomes invisible. Okay, and you can paint white or black at any time. You can use selections and then paint white or black. Tons of options there. Now, if you need any help, check out our pro tutorial, How to Master Layers and Masks in Photoshop. We're getting started here. I'm going to grab a solid color fill layer. Let's just set this to like a neutral gray, and we'll put this right behind our subject. So we'll have a pretty good, let's maybe make it a little bit darker there. There we are. Now we have a pretty good idea of what is visible from this layer. Just those lighter areas that were visible when we use select color range. Now remember, we talked about the edge is it's really the most important part. So what I'm going to do is hold Alt or Option and click on my layer mask. So Alt or Option and click on your layer mask. This will just show you what your layer mask looks like. So you can see this is our normal image, and this is what the layer mask looks like. Now with this view, if I simply paint white with my brush tool, so let's hit B for our brush tool, okay? We're just going to choose a soft edge brush, so you can right click and bring your hardness down to 0%. And I'm just going to paint white right here over top of my subject's face. Okay, and this is on our layer mask, right? Now let's see what that did. If I hold Alt or Option and click on my layer mask again, you can see that our subject's face is becoming visible, which is exactly what we want. Now let's do that again. Hold Alt or Option, click on our subject's face. I'm just going to choose a slightly larger brush now, and we're going to paint visible all, here we go, through this area here, and let's go all the way up to just about there. Okay, Alt or Option again, click on there, and you can see we're making our subject visible. Now, if I just paint with my brush tool and just go out there, something like that, we can click on our layer mask and see, just paint white like that. It's going to make it visible, but you lose the definition of the hair. So I'm using, see it's got a light colored edge all the way around the hair. I'm using that to my advantage. So what I'm going to do now is use a smaller brush and just paint white on the inside of my subject. There we are. Let's increase our flow. I'm going to bring my flow up to about 80% here. I'm going to hit Shift 8 on my keyboard to bring up the flow of my brush. That's just going to put more paint whenever I actually paint. And I don't have any selections active right now. Literally just with my brush tool, just painting white all the way to the edge. Because remember, this edge is the important part. There we go. And let's just do the same right down here as well. Okay, now let's hold Alt or Option and take a look at my layer mask again. We can see our subject is starting to be visible. If we make that background layer invisible, our subject is becoming visible and our background is starting to disappear. Okay, let's keep on going. We got a little bit more to go through. So we're going to continue to just paint white on our layer mask. There we go. Right up to the edge. There we are. And then I'm going to kind of choose a softer brush and just paint white, just like that. Perfect. So you can see our subject looks pretty good, actually, pretty well cut out. Now, we painted white on our layer mask to make that area visible. Again, you just need your hair and your subject to be visible. Now, we can paint black on our layer mask, and that's going to make the background areas invisible. So let's just switch our colors. You can hit X on your keyboard to switch between your foreground and background colors. So now my foreground color is black. I'm just going to paint right over here on our background. We're just going to paint black. I'm not going to get too close to the hair. You can see I'm kind of stopping right there because I don't have any selections or anything that's keeping me from just doing this, painting over my subject, right? So I'm not trying to get super close right now. Okay, but anything that's like not touching the hair at all, that we can just grab a brush tool and kind of paint in. There we go. And we're looking pretty good. There are a couple areas here that it's like we have, you know, some of our subject's hair and her jacket. And then we have some kind of like gray areas here. And if I just painted like that with my brush tool, you're going to see we're losing our nice edge. you know, you're kind of replacing it with this like soft Photoshop edge, and it's going to look like that, right? It's just going to look like you just kind of painted it away. So how do we deal with areas like this, where we have, you know, some of our hair we want to keep, but we want to get some of the background gone? Well, we can use a blending mode with our brush called overlay. And what this does is it makes your light areas lighter, and it makes your dark areas darker. And this is great on a layer mask, because in this case we have this like medium gray, right? And I want this to go to black. I want it to be invisible. So using overlay, it's going to take that gray and it's going to make it darker, but it's going to preserve some of my lighter colors. So it's a great way, anytime you have like a boundary area like here, where you need to preserve some details, overlay as a blend mode for your brush will help you do that. We're going to just use our brush tool, so B for the brush tool. Now here on the top, you'll see mode, and it's set to normal. Now you want it to be normal most of the time. Okay, this is just one special technique where overlay happens to be very helpful. If I have this set to normal, there we go, and I paint here and just go right through our subject's head, it just paints black all the way through the subject's head, right? Now, if I change this from normal down to overlay, there we are, I click here and I paint over there, you're going to see it's leaving my light areas alone, but any of these like middle gray areas, it's taking them away. Let's just undo that. So I click here, paint over here. I haven't let go of this brush stroke yet. There we go. And you can see it's just kind of taking those middle gray areas and making those go away. Alright, so let's just undo that. So again, if it's set to normal, it's just going to do that, which we do not want. If it's set to overlay, it's going to leave the lighter areas alone and just kind of darken up these middle areas. Let's go ahead and start painting in here, and check this out. I'm cleaning up my layer mask. The hair is light on my layer mask, so it's just going away. Or sorry, the hair is staying, the stuff in the background is going away, which is exactly what we want. We'll just use a smaller brush tool here and kind of paint that background stuff away there as well. So what we have now is a really nicely defined edge, there we go, of our sweater and all the way up and around our subject's hair as well. Okay, maybe we'll paint this stuff away here as just a little background detail. But again, having my brush set to overlay is just a really great technique to make sure I don't affect the hair. Now you can also go the other way. You can paint white in an area that's maybe like middle gray. You can paint that back. So if you need a little bit more detail, you can paint white on your layer mask and it's going to get that back. Again, our brush tool has a mode set to overlay. Super important. Really great tool. Let's go ahead and put that back to normal, because it happens to me all the time when I paint with my brush tool and overlay, and then I go to use my brush tool later and it's not working the way I want it to, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's still in overlay blend mode. So just make sure you change your brush mode back to normal, or you might be finding yourself scratching your head as to why your brush tool is not working. So just set the blend mode back to normal. Here's our subject and our layer mask. Let's hold Alt or Option and click on our layer mask again, and we'll make our background invisible, and you can see my subject is totally cut out from her background, including all of the hair. Let's go ahead and turn this solid color fill layer on behind our subject. We can double click there, and you can see I'm changing the color behind our subject, and we've kept all of that detail with our subject's hair. So you can see we've done a really, really great job masking out our subject. And that really wasn't that hard. We used the light color. I'm going to hold Shift right now and click on our layer mask, which just breaks our background visible. Hard to imagine we did such a good job with that background, right? So we selected the light color, which was bordering our subject's hair. Okay? We loaded that into our layer mask, and then we just painted white inside of the border of our subject, and then we painted black outside of the border, and that's what gave us this layer mask. Let's hold Alt or Option and look at it again. This is basically our end goal here, right? It's a very nice layer mask where our subject, including all of her hair, is light or white colored and the background is black. If you get something like this on your layer mask, you've done a great job and your subject is very well cut out from their background and you've done a great job cutting out their hair. We're starting off, we have a bunch of different examples here. This one is great. It works super well. I hope this helped out. And we're going to continue to give you more tools and techniques because not every picture is going to have, you know, a bright colored halo right around the subject's hair. We're going to get into more details, more examples rather, where it's going to get like harder and harder, where maybe you don't even see any difference between your hair and the background. Don't worry, we're going to get you settled and figure out how to do those as well. In our next example, we're going to be hand painting hair with our brush tool. This is a wonderful technique when you need to well define the edge of a person's hairline. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next video.